I'm a minority, so it's some of the surgical fields and urology, probably in particular, there are not a lot of women. We're 6 to 8% of board certified urologists in this country are women, and so we don't have very many role models. I was lucky. I went here, University of Virginia, for residency, and Marguerite Lippert wasn't attending, so at least I had somebody that I could see had done it and was, successful. She had a family, she was married, you had somebody to see. But other than that, and striking out, the balance part is hard. As far as the patients, that is no problem at all. Men want to see a woman. A lot of men want to see a woman and actually seek a woman out. Perhaps under the misguided notion that we are more empathetic or that we're nicer and we're not going to be as severe with them. That part has not been a problem, being a woman either. And thankfully, a third of the residents in training right now are women, so there's going to be a lot more women urologists in the next 20 years. I was born in Syracuse, New York, outside of Syracuse in a really rural area called Cortland, in the middle of nowhere. And my parents, I'm an only child, so I had no brothers and sisters. My mom had a teaching degree, but she never really was a teacher, and my dad was there because he was working in Syracuse for General Electric, so he was an engineer. And so my dad moved around a little bit for General Electric. We even lived overseas for 2 years. We lived on an island called Kwajalein that was only 3 miles in circumference, and he would fly to work every day. This was when I was from 6 to 8. So he would go to fly to a different island, and he was doing missile tracking systems. So missile tracking systems for General Electric. And then when we got back to the States, we moved to Roanoke, Virginia. And so that's when we lived in Roanoke, and I've been in Virginia basically since then. But every year, we didn't have a ton of money, so the vacation we did was we'd go to Long Island, where both my parents grew up. They grew up in Southold, which is the North Fork of Long Island, opposite from the Hamptons. So I always tell people it's where Polish potato farmers were, as opposed to the, upscale Hampton group. And my grandfather was a fisherman, and people would actually drive from Manhattan to have Tony's smoked eels. And then it was just delicious. And really, I've never had anything like it, and the secret died with him because it's gone now. But they were fabulous. Don't know why. Mom's not a doctor, Dad's not a doctor, obviously no uncles, aunts, grandparents, nobody else has ever been a physician. And I don't have any great story like I was sick and people took care of me, and I just really respected them. I just knew. I just wanted to be a doctor. Didn't know what kind, I just always thought I should be a physician. They were really actually came down against it. She said, you're probably not going to get married, you won't be able to have kids. My dad said, you're going to have to take huge loans, your debt will be intense, you'll be paying those back forever, you'll be subject to malpractice. So they were just like tick, 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 all these things that would be negatives about it. And we kind of had a break. My third year of college, fourth year, when I finally decided that's what I was going to do and apply to med school, I said, I don't want your help, I don't want you to pay for this, you're not behind it. But I'm going to do it. And so we had a couple, probably 6 to 12 months of kind of being on the outs. I mean, not terrible, because like I said, I am an only child, so you have a lot of focus on you when you're the only child. But, I committed, I got in, I went to VCU in Richmond, and eventually, they came around, and they were very proud when I graduated from med school. And then there's some pictures I found of my mom. This was at my engagement party. So that was my mom right in the middle there, and there's me with friends of ours. This was in Roanoke. And then this was right before that. That's my mom and I. I didn't get into that. You didn't ask me about that really, but my mom died of an unknown primary. So basically at first she was diagnosed with a tumor in 2007, and they didn't know where it was coming from. So she got some chemotherapy. First, we didn't know what she was being treated for, and then eventually we found out it was a very rare tumor called cholangiocarcinoma. And what was really weird and hard about it is that we were living with her being diagnosed and having a death sentence. They said it was terminal. If she was lucky, she would live a year or 2 years. And we had to live like that. And you don't really know how to treat somebody. You know, you're like, do you pretend it doesn't exist because you want to be normal? She felt great. We would golf. We went on trips to Bermuda. For 18 months, she did really well. And then she died on November 9th of her disease when she had pretty bad liver failure at the end. But what I learned from that experience was A, that we wanted somebody to tell us what the time course was and what was going to happen, and B, she really wanted a chance to do something to feel like she was fighting this disease and she would be around for her grandchildren. So we found this guy who was doing something called Spheres in Cary, North Carolina. So that's how it's kind of like fate always works out. The Cary was right 5 minutes away from Raleigh, where I was living at the time, and she was able to have these radioactive basically radioactive balls put directly into her liver to try to fight this disease. And we don't know if it actually changed how long she lived. That's really hard to tell, but I can tell you it was a huge thing for her mental well-being to feel like she had done something to be around longer to see her grandchildren, and that she was trying to do something other than just live for the last year and try to enjoy herself as much as possible. So I think that whole terrible experience really informed how I want to talk to my patients about it, because I know what it felt like to be her daughter and want to spend time with her and want to know what was going to happen, but still feel like we were doing something to keep her around a little bit longer. If it's expected, I mean, there's sometimes, I'm a big proponent of end-of-life discussions, end of life. Even as a surgeon and an oncologist, that's a little unusual. Sometimes we like to use all these battle terms. We've got to keep fighting. We've got to win the war. We've got to do all these things. I think there's a time, and patients won't know because hopefully they've never been through this before, or their family hasn't been through lots of end-of-life discussions or seeing how things go. So if it's at a point where they should come to terms with what's going to happen, get their affairs in order, that kind of terminology, and let things go, I think that I really want them to do that on their own terms. And I like to be the one to tell them, I think you should stop doing any treatments. I think you should, see your family, be with your minister, whatever your particular faith system is. I think you need to do that and let go. Essentially, I tell them, this is the time to die. It hurts. It hurts so much. So those are the ones that are really hard. But I have to think to myself, I warned them that could happen. It's a terrible thing. But hopefully I can help more people when I get back to doing that. But there have been a couple people that I can still remember, and it still hurts to think about them and that I lost that fight, and I feel like they potentially died because maybe you always think, could I have done something else? Could I have done something? And you rack your brain as to what could have changed. And you can always think backwards and find little things you could have changed if you could. I don't feel I've ever been negligent, but it's like you really think, what else could have happened that could have changed this outcome? And so those are the ones that will stay with you forever. And what I tell my residents is, if you ever stop feeling that way, if you ever stop caring and feeling like you personally ache when somebody loses like that, you shouldn't be practicing anymore. I mean, if you don't care when that happens, you shouldn't be the one taking care of them and doing that. And hopefully that never happens to me, but I really believe that. I mean, I really think that's how you have to face it, and that you should really, really care, and you should hurt and ache when something like that happens.
In order to understand the difficulties in their life and what they're going through, The way Dr. Krupski relates to her patients, to her residents, to the people who work in the clinics with her, to the OR staff, is simply amazing. And because of it, because of how much she cares and how her patients really see how much she cares about them, they trust her. And because of that trust, she can just do really amazing things and is just a phenomenal doctor.
This lady has saved my life. So therefore, there's nothing that I won't do for her, rather. I mean, she has just taken care of me from the beginning, when it didn't look so good, to the end, what you see today. And every 6 months, she takes care of me. So there's nothing in the world that I would not do for her. And I know that there's nothing in the world that she wouldn't do for me. And she's been honest, straightforward, and I could not have asked for a better doctor if God had sent her down personally.
Top that.
Well, I had some pretty serious issues that went on for several years, and I can remember being home one afternoon and about as most pain I've ever endured. Well, that day I went to the emergency room into an ambulance and ended up at UVA with Dr. Krupski. And after we went through the preliminaries, she was very busy and around, and she came back and she said, "You're like a lot of males, you're very impatient." And I said, "Yes, I am that type." And she says, "Well, you're a pretty sick boy, but I can cure you. It's just going to take a while." And after a pretty long while, she saved me. And like this lady said over here, there's nothing I wouldn't do for her, because she did it for me. And we've become good friends, and I come back for my checkups and love to visit.
I think there's 2 parts. One, what really I would like to change is it feels like it's the classic, the working poor are the ones that suffer the most. You know, from an economic standpoint, the patients who have jobs, have 2 jobs, they're the ones that we still will try to charge for the care that we want and put a lien on their house or take their car away. And once you get to a poverty level where you can actually make it into Medicaid or a system like that, it's a lot easier on those patients, and there's some degree of taking care of those patients. But it's the ones that are trying to do it for themselves that seem to be suffering the most. So I wish there was some way we could get better coverage for them and make it easier economically or emotionally, because when you have to sell your only vehicle so that you can go get health care and get taken care of, that's really hard on your family and the rest of, your wife and your kids and all the rest of that stuff. So that's one part. But in terms of what I do, what I really wish is that we took care of the survivors better. So what our system likes right now is, okay, we find out you're sick. We tell you need these x-rays, you need this surgery, you need this chemotherapy. We do all that stuff, hopefully get you well or get you to a remission, and then we just leave you high and dry. So I wish there was some way to incorporate almost like preventive care for these survivors, where we would work on things like nutrition and exercise and mental health, and how to basically empower you to be doing everything you can to keep yourself healthy, to keep yourself from getting a disease recurrence. Quit smoking. We have so many people who still are smoking, even though that's a major risk factor for most of the urologic cancers. But you probably need help. I mean, you need assistance in some of these things. And I would really incorporate Eastern medicine techniques too. We know that acupuncture and yoga and even like psychotherapy or talk therapy, all of these things can help you continue to feel well after you've gone through the initial surge of giving all those things and surgeries and chemos and etc., then I'd really like to see something happen to the people after, in between, and hopefully they don't get a recurrence, but if they did, they're still hooked in the system. They're doing everything they can to keep themselves as healthy as they can. So more like a wellness approach, which I don't think we have right now.